We woke up from one cult, the Watchtower.
Yeah.
And then when you're out for a little while and then you start seeing things happening in the world, it's like, holy crap, I'm waking up to another cult, a bigger cult.
It seems like no matter how open-minded you try to be, it seems like most of us humans really just don't like our worldviews and our identity and all that, which seems to just all be one thing to us, challenged.
If things start to go past your line in the sand, are you just going to step back and let them keep going farther? Or are you going to say, no, this is where I stop. Like, I will not budge from this point. People deserve to be treated in a certain way. They deserve a certain amount of freedom, and you're crossing that line. Hello, everybody. We are back 2 years later.
Yeah.
With the round
Too
table.
long.
Yes.
Too long.
We are back.
And
Did you miss us?
Of course they missed us.
I don't think anybody missed me.
I missed us.
We missed you.
Yeah.
Me and the Aces were doing
really
videos.
Oh, that's right. You
And we
guys
missed
were.
you.
Yeah, I know. We make a good team, so I'm glad we're all back. But there's a reason why I came out of video retirement for this, because I know none of you have been paying attention, but a lot of stuff has happened in the last
Too much
2
to
years.
keep up with.
Yeah, just a few small
Just a couple
international changes have gone on the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Just a few.
And not just the big one, not just the one everybody thinks of, not just the C-19. Like, a lot of things have happened on the world scene. And of course, as educated, informed people, like, we want to know what we need to know, how to react, how to respond, what should we do. But we've all noticed that there's a lot of people, even in the XJW community. I don't keep up with the XJW community that much anymore, but I know you guys do.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of people
Definitely.
that's like they learned the lesson of how to question Watchtower,
Yes.
but they didn't seem to transfer that into how to question.
They kind of stopped there.
Yeah, it stopped there. Like, how to question what you read in the news. How do you question when you hear leaders? How do you question when you hear organizations make claims? Like, how do we apply those same kinds of
I've
things?
just questioned everything to the point where I don't believe anything anymore.
Well, you know, that's a good segue into the next thing I wanted to say, though. These kinds of discussions can get really political, but it's not our purpose to be political.
Nope.
And I think it's important for everyone who's watching to know that we are all on a different political page.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, we
So,
are.
Jimmy,
Yes, we are.
who'd you vote for in the presidential election?
Well, most people know I voted for Trump.
I voted for Biden. Who'd you vote for?
I did not vote for anyone because I do not believe or support the system at all.
Yeah.
And I don't trust them.
So there we have a fair and balanced view here, because
Right.
we all did something different.
Right. None of us we're not all here to like push any specific political agenda.
Nope.
In fact, we
God,
don't
the
intend for
discussions
this-
we've had off camera. Let me tell
That's
you,
a different story.
that's the good stuff.
We'll save those for the outtakes.
Oh, no. YouTube will shut us down so fast. So fast. So maybe we'll upload that stuff to Rumble.
No, yeah.
But it's important that people apply those same lessons to the things that they're hearing now. And that doesn't mean
That
that
we
you
agree
just
on.
automatically
Yes.
say that what people are saying isn't true. No. At least from my perspective, that's not what you do.
Yeah.
But you apply the same understanding that everyone's got a bias, right? Everybody. We can't help
That's
it.
true.
We're all biased. And so our cognitive bias kicks in when
I'd
we
be lying
write or
if I
talk
said I
about
wasn't.
things. Everybody is. We can't help it. It's our biology. None of us are Spock, right? None of us are Vulcans. We're not like perfectly rational, non-emotional creatures. It's not how we're built. So can we apply those same kinds of things that we applied to Watchtower to everything else.
And I know one thing that I said in March 2020, and you just recently texted it to me a couple of weeks ago, that it's funny that we realized we woke up from one cult, the Watchtower.
Yeah.
And then when you're out for a little while and then you start seeing things happening in the world, it's like, holy crap, I'm waking up to another cult, a bigger cult, a bigger picture.
It's like the Matrix. The rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper.
It does.
And the reason why, see, I don't even really like the word cult anymore because of what you said. It came to my realization because I was studying biology and evolutionary psychology and just trying to get a handle on like what makes people respond to things the way that they do. And it occurred to me as I'm reading all this, it's not so much cult behavior in the way we think of. I mean, you can put that label on it, but that makes people think all kinds of religious things, generally speaking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is tribal behavior.
Yes.
This is how our biology, our psychology is built. It's people responding to their group and defending it at all costs because it makes them feel threatened when someone questions their worldview.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad we're finally talking about this on camera.
And we're going to get into that
we've had
as
some
we
damn
go.
good discussions about all this tribalism stuff.
And the thing is, too, people are conditioned to live in fear. So you're already living in fear. So when something is brought to you information-wise, your immediate reaction, if it doesn't match up with what you already believe, is to defend your position.
Right.
How do you not live in fear? Turn the news off.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Turn the damn TV off.
You could do
right
that.
now.
You could do that. Or you could apply the
turn
lessons.
us off too.
Shut it down. You could apply the lessons that we've all already learned. Because if you who are watching, if you were in the Watchtower, if you were one of Jehovah's Witnesses, if you were a believer and indoctrinated like we all were, there are certain things that start to happen that you have to do, certain ways of thinking you start applying to Watchtower that wakes you up to it, that we can do and apply to everything we read and see. It doesn't mean that you are paranoid. It means that you are the true definition of a skeptic. A skeptic is a good thing. A skeptic isn't someone who just disbelieves things. It's someone who needs to see evidence that something is true before they believe it.
It's one of the first things that we learned when we got out of Watchtower, not to just accept and digest what has been handed to us or spoon-fed to us.
Exactly. And that applies to everybody, not just to the Watchtower. Because everybody has an agenda. That's not a bad thing. We have an agenda. Everyone's got a purpose, a reason why they're doing what they do that biases their thinking towards their end. That's normal. That's humanity. That's not necessarily bad, but you have to know how to find out what that person's potential bias is when they're talking to you so that you know, oh, okay, well, I get that this person's saying that, but I also know that they support these things. So I have to take that into consideration when listening to their words. You have to put what they're saying into context. And I feel like a lot of people aren't doing that now. They're just accepting what's handed them and believing it all.
Well, the problem is a lot of people, they don't like to, they don't want to think.
Yeah.
They want people, and we've heard this before, in Watchtower, and people have said, I don't have to think about anything because Watchtower gives me all the information I need.
Right.
I really don't have to think about it. I just listen to them.
And whether it's Watchtower or whether it's your political party or whether it's your family,
it's all connected.
It's all the same kind of behavior. And sometimes we can go off the rails and we can get like really conspiratorial. And I give you an example that I thought was funny and interesting.
Let's get off
like
the rails.
When Beth and I shut down our channels, for the most part, I didn't completely shut it down. I just pared it down to just like the round table stuff.
He kept our round table videos on there.
And I did that because they asked me to.
Thanks,
and
John.
they had put so
thank
much
you.
work into it. It wasn't right for me to unilaterally decide. Imagine that, not unilaterally deciding something. To just take all you guys' work and get rid of it because it was important to you too. So I left that up. And but when Beth's channel completely disappeared. Stop the Shunning. And she's loved. A lot of people followed Beth.
Yes.
We just seem to, quote, disappear. Now, it's true, we didn't go into a lot of detail about why we were doing it, but, you know, that's a little thing that I like to call liberty and personal choice. You know, I don't have to explain
but it made
myself
for
to
good
everybody.
buzz.
But, oh,
Yeah.
goodness. The
How many times were you at? How many times were you
my
asked? What happened to
God.
John and Beth? You were
and-
like,
I even
Seriously.
gave an update, like, through your channel, and I'd said
Yes.
things to you that you relayed.
Yeah.
Like, people, they could know that we're
But they
good.
missed your gorgeous
Yeah,
face.
well, yes, yes, I know. Yeah, I
The
get
stories
it. I
that
get it.
got invented about what happened to you and Beth.
And those stories are the point of what I'm trying to say. When we don't know something, we are inclined to make something up
Yep.
that sounds
fill in the
logical.
blanks.
And I got to admit, like, some of the conspiracy theories sounded reasonable on their surface. They really did. They just weren't true at all. But they sounded reasonable. And if we hear a story that sounds reasonable to us, it sounds logical, especially if it's coming from an authority figure in some, you know, whether it's market or medicine or politics or whatever, because of our tribal nature, we're inclined to believe authority figures more than we probably should.
Yes.
It's the way we're built. But we hear this story and we think, oh,
Some of us.
that sounds true, so it must be true. But it's important for you to remember that Watchtower often sounds good on paper. Like, that's how we would get people to come in, right? It sounded scriptural. It sounded reasonable. It seemed logical.
I even said, it just makes sense.
It just makes sense. But when you dig underneath and you start applying a little bit of critical thinking and external facts to it, it falls apart really quick.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, I want to say something kind of as a side point to that I'm thinking too. You know, a lot of us come from the Judeo-Christian era before the internet, when people generally accepted and believed the Bible as an undisputed fact. So you built the religion and the legalization of the Jehovah's Witnesses on top of that. And then it becomes that much more easy to follow and suck someone in.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same way with our personal feelings and biases. Like, you know, what we talked about in the car. People will listen for two reasons, and I forgot the second reason, but the first one was if it's already what you want to hear.
Yeah.
So if you build your belief system based on what you already want to hear, it's going to be that much easier to just go along with it, whether it's true or not.
Cognitive bias, right? The second reason,
And we're all guilty of that.
yeah, true.
Oh,
The second reason someone will listen to an authority figure is if they're afraid, right? Your brain is a fear-based probability engine.
Yeah, we had that
That's
discussion.
what it is. It is designed, you can say designed or evolved, whatever you believe, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever you believe, the way it functions is your brain is always looking out for things that can harm you. That's its job, to keep you alive for as long as possible. And imagine way back in the past, or maybe now, if you like to hike, you're going through a forest, and out of the corner of your eye, you see a long red thing hanging off a tree, but it's in your peripheral vision.
I'm so glad this is finally on camera.
It's it's in your peripheral vision, not in your clear focused vision. And you immediately, what do? You turn and look.
Yeah.
Why? Why is it so hard to not look at the television in the restaurant when it's on? Because your brain is looking for things it does not recognize to see whether or not it's a threat, right?
Yeah.
Once the brain is in that fear-based mode, it's very easy to convince someone that they're in danger and that they need to listen to you so that they will no longer be in danger.
You know
That's
what
how we're built. Wait, one more thing.
Okay.
Because the leaders, right?
He's on a roll.
Our tribalism, right? We need leaders to come forward and say, this is what we're going to do. Let's all work together and do it so we'll be safe. So that's our default position, is to look for the leader to tell us what to do so we'll be safe. And that has been manipulated like mad.
Yeah,
Why don't people just lead themselves?
they'll show you the fear. They'll present the fear to you. And then once the people are scared and used to that, conditioned, then they come back and say, oh, here's a solution to this fear. You don't have to be afraid, because according to Watchtower, you live in an awful
right.
world,
That's right.
but yet you're going to live in paradise soon. So just do what we say, and we'll help your fear go away. They created the fear.
Yeah, they created the fear, and then they provide the solution.
Exactly.
And you fall for both. We all did.
And it's not just Watchtower.
It's not just Watchtower. What makes you think, and I'm asking this of everyone watching this, what makes you think that if you fell for Watchtower, you can't fall for someone else, right? If you fell for it once, you could fall for it again. Even if you were raised in it, you could fall for it again.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of us, like me, I didn't question Watchtower for a long time. Never even crossed my mind. I was born in, right? Even though I'm an analytical person, my day job, software developer, very analytical, rational individual, I didn't question that, because that was my worldview. So if you're listening to things in the news, if you're listening to the political leaders that you personally support, you may not be as inclined to question what they have to say as you should. And that's what we're going to go do right now. We're going to walk through a bunch of points, things that we saw Watchtower doing, ways in which they manipulated the truth, and we're going to see if we can apply those same things to other groups. All right. So my number one point that I wrote was, when you were one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you were immersed in Watchtower literature, their belief system, and their culture. Ask yourself, what was it about what you were reading, seeing, and experiencing that clued you in to it being propaganda and cult control and not facts about scripture or world events? So Jimmy, you want to do the first one for us?
The A?
Yeah. A.
Okay, so we have, first one is lack of context from sources. And so basically what we're talking about is when you're looking at Watchtower literature, is this where, this kind of goes into B. You want to do A and B together?
Yeah, we can do them together.
Yeah, so A, okay, let's go back up. A is lack of context from sources. B is lack of identifying source quotes, vague language, or one expert said. So how many times are you looking at Watchtower material or material from outside of Watchtower that they'll give a quote, but they won't give the whole context of it. They'll take it out of context. And I think, John, you said that when you were waking up, you went and looked at the quotes in Watchtower, you found them where they came from, and then you read it, and it's like, this is not what this person is saying at all.
That's it. Google Books was great for that, because when Google scanned like millions of books into a library, made it all searchable, you could take a quote from almost any book in the last 30 years and search for that, and it would pop up in context in Google Books. And you could find the author, which is like what we're talking about. Where did it come from? Where was it sourced? And figure out. Sometimes Watchtower would quote like religious leaders of other denominations. It wouldn't name them. It wouldn't tell you who it was, and it wouldn't tell you what the book was trying to prove. And the book's purpose was actually the opposite of why Watchtower was using the quote. They would quote mine.
What we want everybody to realize what we're going to be doing here today is and I think John touched on it before, but in case you missed it, we are comparing these points with what we see in the mass media.
Yeah.
Because it does run the same way.
It does.
Once you look at the evidence and ponder on these points and go back and look at things that you've been looking at or things that you've been reading or things that you've seen on TV. How many times has mass media, how many times have they taken people, doesn't matter who they are, taken them out of context to push a narrative?
Yep.
Or cherry picked.
They do it.
I like what you typed here too. One expert said, the lack of identifying source quotes, which could be vague, and then presented from one expert that supports, whoever's presenting the information's worldview. And, same with Watchtower, same with the media. Maybe we'll hear one expert say this, but they won't show other experts who might have a differing or opposing narrative.
Correct.
And that's especially true like outside of the mass media. And again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? If you have a certain position and you're not the media, who are you going to bring on to back up your position? Your experts. But you need to understand, you, the viewer, and us, that when you hear people, experts, giving one side, that there's usually another side to hear. And don't stop don't just be in the echo chamber of the guy who backs up what you think.
Yeah.
Go listen to the guy who disagrees, because that way you might be completely correct in your thinking, but you don't know that for sure until you start to hear the other side. And propaganda, when we're dealing with the media,
Oh, my goodness.
is only one-sided. The neutral media should be giving you both sides of any issue and letting you decide. When you see that they never do that.
Just
that they
information.
Yes. Just information, no opinion. Leave that to the op-ed, right? That's supposed to be editorial.
Leave that to the viewer.
Yeah, but when you start seeing any media, whether it's video or print or whatever, only ever present one side of a specific argument, they stop being the media and they become propagandists.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
And the thing about propaganda,
Regardless of what side you're on.
Regardless. Yeah.
the thing about propaganda is it's instant. It's flashy.
Yeah.
People are drawn to it. Yeah. And so they jump all over it. And then later on, the truth actually exposes itself.
Right. And propaganda is, like you're saying, it's very simple. The message is very simple. It's easily digestible. It's made, what's the word? It's just too straightforward. Truth is usually nuanced. There's usually complex data points you need to be paying attention to. It's not always, this is always the answer. It's like, well, it depends on these factors. The truth is a lot harder to absorb than the propaganda line, which is why propaganda is so easy.
And think about when we woke up from Watchtower. How did we feel when we realized, oh my God, they've been lying to me for all these years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? And then you just start questioning everything you learned.
Yeah.
Everything falls apart.
And it's like,
the floodgates.
what in the world?
Yeah.
So it's because it's affecting it's affecting those biases that you created for yourself, or that Watchtower or other organizations created for you, and you're fighting against that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we need to apply that to everybody, not just to Watchtower.
Yes.
All right, Diaz, you want to read number C? Because C is important.
Yes, I will read.
Oh, you touched on
Number
this
C.
Yeah, we touched on it, but we'll go through it more.
All right, so number C.
Hashtag C.
Right?
Yeah.
Lack of presenting opposing ideas, not even for rebuttal purposes.
Now, we did talk about this, but Watchtower didn't even point out the fact that other people believe other things. Like, they would almost ignore that completely in some areas, right? Now, you would think that if you really had the truth, that you would be perfectly okay with taking the lie and pointing out all the problems with it step by step.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that very much, with a few things where arguably they had some ground, like, talk about the Trinity and hellfire and things like that. There's an argument to be made for those things.
You
But with
wouldn't need
anything
so
else,
much.
they didn't do that.
You wouldn't need so much censorship in a world where there is very solid truth.
Yeah.
You wouldn't need so much censorship.
What do we always say? Truth doesn't fear scrutiny.
Oh no.
If you have to censor, then you fear scrutiny. And if you fear scrutiny, then you have an agenda that is not in people's interests. So pay attention. The media you consume, the platforms you're on, do they censor? Do they cut off? And I'm not talking, like, let's be straight up here. I'm not talking about cutting off people who wear tinfoil hats and live in their mom's basement. That's
Do they have
not
one
those people.
worldview?
I mean, personally, I lean very freedom of speech in that regard. So I think people should be able to say what they want. But I also get it. Look, like, for instance, YouTube is a private company. They have the right to shut stuff off if they want. But if they start shutting off highly credentialed, highly educated individuals who they've been to school, they have long history of practice in these areas, whatever it is, whether it's politics, medicine, doesn't matter what it is, technology, if you start cutting people off just because they don't agree with your narrative and they have the credentials to speak, now we're not dealing with someone who's, that guy's just some nut in the basement.
Correct.
We're not talking about that anymore. Now we're talking about censorship of people whose side deserves to be heard. And Watchtower gave no one a platform that disagreed with them at all. The media, whatever media you consume, should be giving a platform to the credentialed people who disagree with, even if it's the mainstream accepted, accepted truth. They should be giving a platform to people who have the credentials to argue the other side.
And they shut that down. I mean, you look at
It's freedom of opinion.
the mass media last year when they just shut down all the doctors.
Yeah, that's one way in which that's happened. And I don't lean right. I don't. But I don't like censorship either. And I don't think that we should be shutting people down who have the credentials to speak. But I don't want to get too much into that because that's political. We're talking about points. E.
D.
No, D, okay. Well, yeah, this is similar, but there's a little more to it. Restricting access to opposing viewpoints. Don't read apostate literature or worldly wisdom, and don't associate with non-Jehovah's Witnesses beyond what's absolutely necessary. So if you find yourself hearing from people saying, don't listen to them, they're just crazy. Don't listen to them, they're filling the pejorative label here.
Yeah.
Whatever they're calling other people who disagree with them. And if they're saying you shouldn't be around those people or those people shouldn't be allowed to be around us, guess what you got? You're right back in Watchtower world.
And they're treating you like you're a child if they do that.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about that, they're telling you to be like a child and not think for yourself. It's like at that point, I guess, especially after waking up from Watchtower, I would say to myself, well, look, I can think for myself. I have the cognitive ability to think for myself. And if I'm really standing on something that's so solid and so factual, so truth-based, then I shouldn't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
That should make you think right there.
Yeah.
If somebody is like a parent trying to tell you what to do and what to think.
I think another thing too, and I've been
Who to
saying
listen to.
and I've been saying it for a while, and we've had this discussion before too. Since we're making a connection between what Watchtower does and what the mass media does, think about what they call the people that leave, or what Watchtower calls the people that leave the organization. They call them apostates.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do they call us apostates? Well, one, they want the rank and file to understand, hey, don't go listen to them. Those people are crazy. Okay.
That's right.
All right. So
That's
now, by just changing the words a little bit, how has that affected people outside of Watchtower? They're called conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, I see the point you're making.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I were to call you a conspiracy theorist, what is that telling people?
Yeah.
That's telling people, hey, don't listen to this guy because he's crazy.
He's a kook.
It's the
a
same.
silencing
It's the
tactic.
same thing.
It's
Yes,
an
silencing
ad
tactic.
hominem attack, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But that's what it is. You're attacking
That is what it is.
the person's character rather than the argument that they're making. You know,
Yeah.
and you especially
Yes.
my stance is, especially when you're dealing with highly credentialed people who clearly have the experience to be making this argument, you shouldn't be shutting them down. Like, I don't think we should shut down people generally, like I said.
Or
I'm
at least have
in
a
freedom to
valid
speak.
opinion about it.
At least
Yeah.
let people who are highly credentialed speak. I think that seems fair
Yeah.
to me, right? I want to know what highly credentialed people say on both sides, so I can draw
That's
a
right.
conclusion about what I think is right or true or not. But I'm a registered independent. I did vote for Biden, but I'm a registered independent. So I don't vote for a party. I vote for the people that stick closest to my personal ideology. I wish more people would do that.
See, that's how I feel too. Even though I did support Trump, there's just things that I'm looking at in the world aspect of things. And, you know, I don't behold to a party. I look at what's best for the people. You know, that's just me.
And
you know,
that's a good way to be.
And I don't believe none of it.
I'm not going to lie to you. I lean more and more towards that as time goes on.
I think-
because I just don't trust what people are saying generally now. Like leadership,
I think it's
have
all a
problems
damn
with them.
stage of puppets.
you know what?
Yeah.
Even though we have 3 different ways of doing things and looking at things, that's one thing that we here at the round table do agree on. I think we all have that common ground where we don't trust.
Well, that
Defend.
is one way we agree.
Skeptics.
Yeah,
Skeptics.
The right kind of skeptic.
We have a lot of questions.
We have no reason to suspect the government.
And shouldn't
There's no reason to be
questions
skeptical.
be answered? I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
seem fair that questions should be answered.
Well, it's like when I was at the end of getting
Skepticism
ready to
is
leave Watchtower.
intelligence.
607, I went to the elder and asked him, hey, can you explain the 607 thing to me? Because everybody else is saying it happened in 587. Oh, no, you just need to ignore that. Just ignore that. And because, you know, you got to trust the organization. And I'm like, yeah, but for me, and for those that follow me know this, things have got to make sense. So if everyone else is saying that Jerusalem fell in 587 and you're the only people that are saying it's 6:07, you got some explaining to do.
That's true. I agree. But I'm going to push back on it just a little bit.
That's fine.
That just because the majority believes something is true doesn't mean that it is either.
True. I agree with
so
that.
although it should be that if you hear everyone is saying this, but they're saying that, you shouldn't immediately dismiss them, but it should give you pause to look into it and say, wait a minute, if all these people think this and you think that, let me dig into this and see who's actually correct.
The popularity of an
facts.
idea does not make it true.
Yeah.
See, and that's the thing that the elder was doing. He was dismissing it all.
Right.
And I was like, I got questions.
Yeah.
Why is this the case?
The fact that the majority believes something different doesn't mean they have the right answer, but it should help you stop and question.
Yeah.
And look for the answers to those questions.
Yeah.
I think so. All right, E.
Anecdotes rather than data. Stories about people coming into the org rather than numbers showing real growth. Have we seen any new numbers from Watchtower in a
I
while?
don't pay any attention anymore.
I haven't seen any.
Yeah.
Has anybody seen any numbers? Didn't they stop doing they stopped doing the yearbook stuff?
Right.
So we don't really know what's going on there. And, if you look at their material, there are a lot of stories. Oh, well, this person was down on their luck, and then all of a sudden, somebody came to their door that day and answered their questions.
And yet, we see nothing but scaling back.
There's total scaling back. Totally.
So when you're reading the news and they're telling you stories, but not providing data and charts and numbers and facts, pay attention to that. Because, there's nothing wrong with the human interest story. There's not. We're emotional creatures. It's helpful to put it into the real world for us. But that should also be backed with data, charts, facts, figures. And often what you'll find is that it's not. You'll see a shock value headline, a shock value picture, and a shocking story that heavily leans to one side of an argument and no data.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, too, I think it's also good, in my opinion, to go by what you see a lot of the time. A lot of people will, for instance, our numbers are growing like never before, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses. We're growing, we're doing great. But what do you actually see? What do you actually see? You see congregations being sold. You see congregations being merged. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this without getting too deep into it. I think it's good to be observant. For instance, let's talk about C19. Okay, so they talk a lot about the numbers in the media, what's going on. But when I look around, and this is just me having my own personal opinion here, when I look around, I don't really see things being a lot different than what they've always been.
Right.
So I feel like sometimes, not all the time, but I feel like sometimes it's good to observe the world around you.
Yes.
Use your own critical thinking skills to kind of look at the world around you and just look around.
What are things telling you? What is your gut saying to you?
How credible is the information that I've been handed, because I look around and I don't really see a lot of it.
And another thing to add on to that, if someone is intentionally pushing propaganda, like Watchtower, we can agree that Watchtower pushes propaganda.
Yeah.
Then what would keep them from making up stuff?
Yeah.
Making up stories.
That's a good point.
Like, what was the name that? Oh, shoot!
And
the name.
If they went that far,
it appeared
why
in
wouldn't they go a little bit
Watchtower
further?
all the time. Andre.
Yeah,
Andre.
yeah.
When you
How many Andres
There's
are?
like 7 million Andres in the stories of Watchtower. Like, wait, what?
Wait, what?
So-
yeah, you didn't know this? Yeah, I ran the numbers once. Like, if you search Google and you do like site,
How convenient.
JW.org, Andre pops up everywhere.
So-
right, and that makes you quit. Wait a minute, there can't be that many Andres, and not all these articles said the name has been changed to protect whatever. So that clues you in. They're making this up.
Yeah, and they do it in mass media. We see that. To control the people. If they want to push the propaganda and they're pushing it, they have many avenues that they can take. And one of those things that they can do is just make up a story.
Right.
Put it out there.
Or not check that all the facts about a story are correct. So when stories spread, they often change. And as a journalist, your job should be to go make sure that the story you're hearing is actually in line with what really occurred. And sadly, because
It's not what we're
the
seeing.
mass media is very much in
Yeah.
a race to get it out first now, to get the clicks, to get the ads. A lot of them they're not making the money they used to make, right? Because there's competition. So they have to be first to story.
And
if
that's
they
one of
want to
those-
get the viral action on their story, which means they're not taking the time always to look into things the way they should. But I will push back on you guys just a little bit because trying to be balanced here. Diasis was saying that what do you see? What are your observations? And that's important. But also be aware that just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not real or it's not actually happening. Just because
Sure.
it's not happening where you are doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening somewhere else. But absolutely, I think you should rely on your own observation too, but not 100%. At least let it trigger you to start asking questions if what you see is different from what you're being told is going on.
I suppose that's a fair point.
We're trying to
I
be fair.
guess.
Trying to be fair.
That's what we do. Fair and balanced.
Yeah. All right. Now the next one is F.
Oh,
Spaghetti logic. Jumping from scripture to scripture, dot connecting, rather than making cohesive, logical arguments.
Watchtower did this all the time.
I can't tell you how many times I was at a door and I would.
Yep.
I would share.
We already know, man. We already know.
You share a scripture
Yep.
and they're like, well, what, and the house was going, what, well, hold on, let me go to this other scripture.
Well,
and show
see,
you.
look,
Yeah.
well, Psalms
And
over
then-
here
and
say.
then, oh, wait, hold on, I got one more. And then you end up with
Revelation.
like 5 scriptures and you're trying to put it all together. And you can blame Watchtower for that, of course, because you were
The Book
shown
of Enoch.
you
Yeah.
were shown how to do that. Because how many times are you looking at some of their material and in quotations at the end of a sentence, it's got 6 scriptures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
It's dot connecting.
1914 was the worst for that because in order
Oh,
to get
man.
to that, you would have to jump all over the Bible.
Daniel to
to
Revelation
get
to
that
Matthew 24.
that strange equation that
Yeah.
they used. I'm like, you realize that these books were written hundreds, sometimes
Connecting things that are
1,000 years
unrelated.
apart. Why didn't God just lay the whole thing down? Why didn't he
Right.
just say, in the year 1914, after my son dies, we're going to have this thing happen and he's
Yeah.
going to be back in heaven? They use spaghetti logic. And here's why that works, not just with Watchtower, but also in the media. If things sound complicated, we as human beings tend to shut down and be like, well, that sounds really complicated. This expert must understand a lot more than I do because I don't get this.
And so you're lazy.
You don't
and
wanna
you hand
think.
your cognitive
Yeah.
thinking over to someone else, and you plop down and you just say, go ahead, just lead the way, man.
You're much more easily convinced if things sound too complicated and you can't wrap your brain around it. But I'm going to tell you a secret that's not really a secret.
Yeah, don't be lazy.
If someone really understands what they're saying, and what they're saying is just by nature complex, if they really understand it, they can break it down in simple, clear logic to you.
Didn't Einstein have a really good quote about that?
I don't know, maybe.
Okay, I don't know if Einstein had a quote about that. He might have. Okay, I'm looking over here because this is a really good camera angle. Einstein
Oh, yeah, I forgot
said,
about that.
Yeah, right. Einstein had a really great quote, supposedly. He says, if you can't explain, a topic simply, then you don't understand it enough.
Yep, that's it. That's the size. And that's true. That's true. If the guy on the news or in the whatever media you're watching most people video these days, if the guy on the video is just going on and you don't understand anything he's saying, there's probably a reason that person doesn't want you to understand what he's saying. Or whoever's paid him to be up there, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Or because it
want
just
you to
doesn't make
understand.
sense.
Or maybe it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Or maybe
You're trying to make something make sense. It doesn't make sense.
maybe he's dot connecting. And this does not just apply to the mass media. I also think people need to apply this when they hear what people call a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I am very data and facts driven. And I
Yeah.
have gone and, I have watched videos that people said, you need to watch this. I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. And I've watched them jump, and connect these tiny little things to try to prove a point. I'm like, that doesn't prove what you're saying at all. It sounds reasonable, but the logic you're using to tie this stuff together just doesn't fly.
You
So
really
you
are
have
in
to
the
be
middle.
careful of that too. It goes both ways, not
It
just
does.
what
He's
you hear in the mass
perfectly
media.
in the middle. This guy is perfectly in the middle. He doesn't even like the term conspiracy theory.
I
And half
don't.
the
I
time
don't
you tell
like
him
it.
about something, he's like, okay, well, what facts and proof? It's like, John, it just makes sense. What, you trust the government
Alright,
now?
so-
He's like, well,
so
no,
this is
but it
what-
doesn't
this-
make sense. Give me some data.
This is something that I want to point out about something that me and John have experienced, and we won't talk about the subject, so to speak. We'll just talk about the action that we took. We talked about that there's two different paths. We have two different paths to truth.
Right.
Okay. There is a subject that me and him completely agree on. Okay. A year ago, John wasn't there yet.
Nope.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So now, when I was speaking my position back then, I didn't have all the evidence and the analytical data information. I didn't have all that stuff. And I know John, he's that type of person. So I was saying stuff to him, and of course he wasn't really into it yet.
I wasn't buying it at all.
He wasn't buying it at all.
No.
Okay. So I had
The arguments we had.
Oh,
yeah,
Lord.
I should be
yes.
talking. So
Yeah, yeah.
I had an intuitive nature about myself. I could just see things. It's just something in me. I just knew something was wrong. And later on, John comes to me and says, "Hey, what about this information here? Whatever." Once he got facts, once he got evidence, he's like, "You know what? We came to the conclusion that what we were seeing was true."
Yeah.
He went from it at another angle, took a little longer because that's just what he needed for himself. Me, I was like on it, and that's just because I'm just an intuitive person. But it doesn't make either one of us wrong. It just means it might take someone a little more time, a little more evidence, a little more facts to come to a realization that something is true or not.
And here's
You know?
here's a little bit of a difference there. That's a nuanced difference. Like Jimmy, once his gut told him something was wrong, then that was enough. Of course, he did go looking, right?
Yeah.
He went looking for facts and
Yes.
data too. But once his gut told him something was wrong, like that was enough for him to believe it's wrong. Now I have to go find out why. Why do I think this?
Right.
I'm kind of the opposite. My
Yeah.
gut was telling me something was wrong, but my default position is okay. I think something's wrong, but before I say I believe it's wrong, I'm going to go find some facts and evidence to prove whether or not it's wrong.
And another thing is when you're someone like me that goes on gut thinking, intuitive thinking, that does leave the possibility that I could be wrong about
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And instead of, someone coming at me and all like, "Oh, Jimmy, you were wrong about this. You were wrong." Okay, yeah, so what? So what? At least I'm making an effort to try to figure out what in the world is going on with some things.
That's growth,
And so,
for all of us.
and see, yeah, absolutely. I'm not scared of being wrong. I will admit if I'm wrong about something,
We learned that the day we left Watchtower.
Yeah.
And that drops back to biology. Again, why are we so afraid of being wrong? Let me illustrate it for you. Let's say back before civilization
Why
was
is that?
civilization. Here's why.
Please explain this.
Back before civilization was what we know it, big cities, big countries, huge numbers of people in groups. People lived in tribes of 2-3 dozen people max, right? Let's say it was your job to go hunt and find the food. You think you found it. You go back to the group and you're like, "Hey, I found it." So everybody's like, "Great, let's go get it." Everyone goes there and you were wrong. What did you just do to the whole tribe? They picked up everything.
Spear him.
Your life could literally be in danger because you put everyone else in danger, and that might make you look to everyone else as someone that they shouldn't keep around. Whether they eject you, whether they end you, doesn't matter. One of those two things could happen. Biologically,
You've been exiled from the tribe.
we
Yep.
are still that guy. We still don't want to be exiled from the tribe. That's a good way to put it. Because we know if that happens, or in the past, if that happened, we might die. We can't do it alone. Biologically, we still think that way. So we will defend that worldview. Just like that
Or
guy,
if
I'm
we're
sure,
wrong.
from that tribe was like, it was here yesterday.
Well,
I know it was here. I'm
social
not
isolation.
wrong. It must be nearby. Let's keep looking. I'm sure it's here because of the price. you still believe internally that the price of you being wrong somehow could result in your harm, or
Social
your
suicide,
demise.
social isolation.
All those things. But that's not true anymore, but we still fear it. And that's why we're so afraid of someone questioning our worldview. It's hard to be okay with being wrong.
You know, we've said before in previous videos that as far as the XJW community is concerned, there's a lot of folks that really haven't washed that mentality away from the way the Watchtower teaches people about being right all the time. We've said before that that's the last piece of indoctrination to wash away. And you can see it, that there's a lot of folks out there that, I guess if you want to just make it a little simpler, they're afraid of being wrong. Because Watchtower had instilled in us that what you have in front of you from this organization is right, it's correct, and you need to believe it, and so be it. If anybody tells you any different, you know, tell them they're not right. And I think that mentality has seeped into the XJW community because a lot of people, they just don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be wrong.
The truth
challenges
is,
their worldview.
It's not just XJ, it's everybody.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Most people are this way, and you don't just automatically get over that just because you've left Watchtower. You
Right.
don't
Attach their
automatically
identity to it.
just say, okay, I'm good now, I'm never going to do this again. Well, it's nice to think that, but when it's so ingrained in you to be this way, and you spent most of your life being this way, it's not that easy. You don't just flip that switch and magically become different. It takes time and effort, and we still could fall for it. It still could happen again, which is why you have to constantly think about these points as you learn anything new. You should immediately be skeptical.
You know, our identities really get wrapped up with our beliefs. And that could come in the form of the media, religion, anything.
Politics.
And it seems like no matter how open-minded you try to be, it seems like most of us humans really just don't like our worldviews and our identity and all that, which seems to just all be one thing to us, challenged. And we just defend it. We won't hear new information. We won't try to accept it. We won't try to hear anything that could argue against it. It's like it threatens our whole identity.
You know, when I woke up from the Watchtower, I really didn't know what my identity was. You know, I think a lot of people can relate to that they really don't know where they're at in the world, in their worldview. But I'll tell you what, one thing with me is I have always tried to keep my mind open. And so open that if a freaking alien landed his ship down here right now, I'd be like, okay, all right, there we go.
We're doing a show. You're just in time.
That's just an example.
All I want to know is, where do you put the camera?
I know, right? My mind is so open to things because this world is bigger than any of us can imagine. There's so much stuff going on in this world that we don't know, we don't see, you know? And so you can't have a closed mind in this day of time. You
can't.
You've got to keep your mind open.
Can't.
And it just drives me crazy when I'm having a debate with somebody or whatever, and I just can't get them to open their mind just a little bit.
Have an open mind, but back it up.
Yes.
With data.
Yeah.
Be willing to ask questions,
So true.
but make sure you find out that the answers have supportive evidence. Don't believe something just because it sounds reasonable. Watchtower sounded reasonable.
Okay, you know what? In line with that, I think that it's good to, you know, like you said, have an open mind. If you believe in something, because we all believe in stuff, be honest enough to acknowledge that it's a belief that you have. Even if you can't solidify it, it's a belief. And don't take it any further than that, because I think we do that even at a Watchtower, where we take it as, you know, our belief is fact because we want to believe it.
How many times have we had a conversation?
Keep it in the beliefs.
Yeah, how many times have we had a conversation and I'll tell you, John, this is what I believe. I don't have the facts and the evidence yet, but this is what I believe.
I believe it to be true.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like,
I don't
it's
know.
Okay to start
That's honesty.
there. And I was going to save this to the end, but I think we've been talking about it so much, we may as well say it now.
Okay.
When you and we were in Watchtower, when we were Jehovah's Witnesses, we didn't have evidence that something was wrong yet.
Right.
Our gut told us something wasn't right, and we couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, and we couldn't prove that we were right. But the question starts with that doubt. The question starts with the belief that something's wrong, and that's good. I read this great book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink, and that's what he talks about, is our ability to make snap judgments that oftentimes have amazing results, and sometimes you've got to be careful about trusting it. But he gave a great example of a piece of art. It's at the very beginning of the book, like a statue that the guy selling it to this famous museum claimed was this original ancient statue. And they got all these experts in, they did all these technical tests and on it, and they're like, yes, this is one of those things. And they paid the guy $10 million. And then afterwards, an actual art historian walks in and looks at it, and he immediately knows this is a forgery. But he can't say why. And he asked the curators, like, you haven't paid for that yet, have you?
Oh, God.
Try to get your money back.
We did.
Because it wasn't actually what the guy claimed it was. It turned out it was a forgery.
Wow.
But the art historian didn't know why he knew that. He just knew. It was some little thing. I think it was like on one of the fingers or some just little thing jumped into his mind and said, this is wrong. That is a wonderful place to start. Your brain is an amazing engine. It can connect so many things faster than you can rationally understand it at all. Sometimes going with your gut is the right answer, but let it be where you start. Let it start the questions, so that you go out and try to find the answers to the doubt that you're feeling inside. That's what you had to do with Watchtower. That's what we had to do with Watchtower. And you should do that anytime you have a doubt in your gut. Don't believe somebody just because they're an authority figure. Don't believe them just because they sound smart or it seems reasonable. Right. If your gut's telling you something's wrong with this, that's important. Doesn't mean you're right, but it's important, and you should start looking.
And if you haven't reached that point to exercise that mental capability there, when you're having a conversation with folks that are trying to do that, don't demean them.
Yeah.
Don't demean them.
Yeah.
Yep. And I see so much of that, you know, if
pause there and read G, because that's the next
G?
point. Yeah.
Okay. Read G. Ad hominem. I always have a hard time saying that word. Ad hominem attacks. Attacking people's character rather than their arguments. Mentally diseased apostates. Y'all are so mentally diseased. I'm ashamed to be with y'all.
I admit that I am mentally diseased, but I like it that way.
I'm down with the sickness.
So when I'm having a conversation with somebody and I put out something that goes against what they believe, I'm just waiting for the first name calling. I'm waiting to be labeled as, okay, we all know I voted for Trump, so they label me as a Trumper. Okay, it's what it is.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean your argument's wrong.
Exactly.
Just because they don't like the guy you voted for.
Exactly.
Right?
So, and then if you got the name calling, you got the labeling, and then what comes next? Blocked.
Yeah.
Unfriended.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear it.
Now, if I unfriend somebody just because I got tired of dealing with their crap, and I'm
if
done
somebody's
with it,
abusive, you should.
I'm just done with
you
it.
should.
You know what happens to me a lot? I'm in the Jehovah's Witness forums, and they're the rudest ones online.
Oh, yes.
They're the ones throwing all the ad hominem, all the disrespect, name calling, and you disgusting, filthy apostates. It's like, I wasn't rude. I wasn't disrespectful. I came in here and I presented a problem with your belief or why I disbelieve it or some kind of critical thinking question. And I get insulted for it. I'm not rude back to them. Not usually. Now, I will get tired of their crap sometimes and be like, all right.
Me too.
But, you know, we see the same thing out here in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're supposed to not be like the world. Y'all are supposed to not be like the world. We're supposed to not be like the world, where we just start calling people names or attacking people instead of
or the media coming out and telling you,
addressing the argument,
or the media coming out and saying, oh, because these certain, I'm gonna not make it political, but because these certain people aren't doing this certain thing, you need to stay away from them.
Right.
I think it's time we shun a certain group of people.
They put labels.
When they said that, I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, that is just like Watchtower.
Yeah, it is.
Anytime you see any group behaving like Watchtower, that should be a massive red flag
Absolutely.
to you, that there is something else behind.
And the XJW community needs to be able to be aware of that.
We should know better by
I
now.
would think that the XJW community would be able to pick up on that quicker than anybody else.
You would think, but it's hard, again, and I'm trying to be kind about it. It's hard because biologically it's how we're built.
Right.
We're built to support our group, and when we're afraid, we can't think rationally. So I try to be
We defend our
understanding
group.
and compassionate to people. However, that said, when someone starts labeling, not even necessarily name calling, so to speak, saying they're stupid or whatever, but just starting to attach a label to someone based on one thing they've said or believe, as soon as that person starts labeling the other person, that should clue you in that the labeler doesn't have evidence. If they had evidence, they would stick to the evidence and not label. And that applies to you and that applies to us. If we start labeling people, even in our own mind, that don't agree with us, what does that mean? Ask yourself, can you disprove with facts, with data, what this person just said? Or are you calling them a name, even in your mind? Oh, that guy's just stupid. Are you doing that because you cannot refute what they're saying? Now, maybe they're wrong, maybe they are, but you don't know how to prove it. So rather than just leaving them with a label, oh, well, they're just stupid, I'm going to ignore them, go see if you can disprove them with facts and data. If you can, great. If you can't, maybe it's time to listen just a little bit more.
I can't tell you how many times I've put something out there and I've told people, listen, I'm willing to have a conversation with you.
Yes.
As long as you and I are being mutually respectful to each other. If you can bring me facts and evidence, then we can have a great conversation. And if I bring you something and you start labeling me, that means that you, like you just said,
there are so
you don't
many
have,
people that
you can't
cannot
answer
do that.
They cannot answer a critical thinking question. They always want to say, he goes, well, that's just a logical fallacy. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Why?
I've been out of this organization now. December will be 3 years. I really never heard what a logical fallacy was until I got into the XJW community. And I feel, this is my opinion, I feel that a lot of folks that don't agree with something fall back on logical fallacies as their defense mechanism. That's just my opinion.
But it's only a logical fallacy if they're actually using the logical fallacy. Like, you have to be able to specify which one it is. If you're just blanket state, oh, that's just logical fallacy. Okay, well, which one and why?
Yeah.
Can you explain to me why you're saying that this is a straw man attack? Can you explain why this is an ad hominem attack? Can you explain it? Because if you can't, that's just another label. You're just slapping another label on somebody so you can dismiss what they're saying rather than having to actually take it seriously. I will reiterate. Just because you can't disprove them doesn't mean they're right, but it does mean you can't disprove them. So you should go and try to find out how to disprove them. And if in doing that you realize that you cannot and no one else can either, maybe you should listen up. Maybe they're onto something. Maybe not, but admit that they have a point and you can't find an answer that negates the point.
And remember, it's okay if you're wrong.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It got you out of Watchtower.
Yes.
You used to think you were right. You realized you were wrong. It's okay. It's good.
Got
You're
you out of
free
Watchtower.
from that
I like
now.
that.
Free yourself from other things by admitting that you're wrong, or at least that you don't know. And then if you find out you're wrong, guess what? That's another lie you don't have to believe.
And
that's a good thing.
And here's another thing. For the folks that was saying something and they were right, they had the facts, they had the evidence, and then the person on the other side comes back later and says, you know what? After they've attacked you, called you names and all that stuff, they come back later and say, you know what? I did the research. I looked at the facts. I looked at the evidence. You were right.
Yeah.
That person that's right has got to be humble.
Yeah.
They've got to not do the "I told you so" thing, which I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm human. There's some people
Just
that
bang them over the head.
there's just some people.
I told you were an idiot.
Exactly. There's just some people that I just
What did I tell you?
And so when the facts never, I'm like, look, I told you. I told you it was gonna happen.
Wave my Jimmy flag.
I mean, it's just natural, but I really, really try not to do that.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard.
I mean, did I do it to you?
No, you didn't. And I don't think I've ever done that to you when you've said, you know what, that's right. Because we have both moved towards the middle of our arguments in another number of areas.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. We were having this conversation the other day. I get that because of our tribal nature as human beings, we're afraid to be wrong, but you're safe. The grocery store for now isn't going to kick you out just because you're not right, right? If you're wrong, you can still eat. Your job's not going to fire you yet. You know, these things are going to happen. You're okay.
They just think you're a major D-bag.
So you got three options whenever you hear someone else's argument that's different from yours, right? And when I say argument, I don't mean fighting with people. Just hear what they have to say. Hear them out. One, you can hear them out and say, you know what? I don't agree with you. I still believe my data is correct, and I'm going to stick with my opinion. Perfectly acceptable for you to do that.
Yeah.
Two, you could say, you know what? I don't think you're completely right, but you've made a couple of good points, and I can see how you were right in these areas, and so I need to adjust what I think and refine it some, but I still think that largely I'm correct, right? Or three, you can say, wow, I was completely wrong about this. You were correct. I'm going to switch my position. All three of those responses.
That's my favorite one. That's the one that I like to hear.
All three of those responses are perfectly acceptable. There's
here, let me crown you with the dead set real quick.
Yeah.
There you go.
So don't be afraid to be wrong, but also don't be afraid to be right, because you might be right. And you don't have to agree just because you're willing to hear someone out. Doesn't mean you think they're right. It means you're willing to listen, and that makes you a true skeptic. And we need a lot more of those people.
Yes, we do.
Now.
You know what I like too is when someone's willing to hear someone out, is when they can come back and say, okay, I heard your point. I like to tell you why I don't think it makes sense, or what about it doesn't make sense to me. To me, when you can have a discussion like that, dare I say, a quote from the Bible, iron sharpens iron. Mm-hmm. You know, you both probably arrived to a more well-rounded point, and you've both refined your discussion or point of view a little bit more.
That's called the art of conversation that makes everyone stronger. And unfortunately,
it's called evolution.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think in this day of time with all the technology and the distractions we have, people have lost the art of communication.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
We're the most connected and the least connected that we have ever been.
Yeah.
Because we're connected in the sense that we have all this information coming at us through our devices
the
all
Matrix.
the time. But we seem to be less connected to each other as communities, as families, because that's all we are, is a big family. Mm-hmm. We seem less connected to people in that way, even though we have the ability to be more connected than ever. Yep. And that's a problem. Because when you stop seeing the person on the other end, because you're seeing them through a device as a human being, and you start seeing them as an enemy, now you're creating a problem. It's a lot harder to sit across the table or next to someone and share a beer and discuss something you both completely disagree with each other on. It's a lot harder to be insulting and terrible, because you've got all these biological filters, right back to what I was talking about before.
Billy Badass.
All of these biological filters that say, if I start insulting this guy just because I disagree, I might get my butt kicked. Or there might be a problem. It might bring harm to me. So while I'm not necessarily going to agree with them, let's hear each other out. And you'll be amazed at how you come to a conclusion. You may not agree, but you may still respect them. You may still get along. Hello, we disagree on a lot of things fiercely.
We're the most different people. God, it's the crazy
But
thing.
I would say though, the one thing that brings us together is we want people to be able to have their freedom.
Yeah.
Yes.
To have, be able to put food on their table, not be hounded by the government or any organization looking to control us. We just want to live free and be able to be happy and just leave us alone.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to say to that there's a point at which your freedom stops and does legitimately infringe on someone else's. There is a point of where that happens. But you also have to decide, like, how far down that road are you personally willing to go? Because you have to remember, you might think someone else is infringing on you, and that may be true. But you also have to stop and think, at some point, what I want to do legitimately could be thought of by someone else as infringing on them, and how far am I willing to let it go before I have to draw a line? You need a line in the sand. You need one, and you need to know where it is so that you can walk up to that line but not past it. Everybody's idea of how much freedom we should have is just a little bit different, but we all want it. And you need to know where your line is. And if too many people are crossing that line, we have a problem.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people would agree we have a problem with people crossing that line. And the way they defend that is they say, yeah, but you're infringing on me. Yes, but I have freedom too. And at some point, you need to be okay with what I'm doing if it's not directly impacting you.
That's the thing. You should be able to have the freedoms to do what you want as long as you're not harming or hurting other people.
And even if you are, to what degree is it really causing harm? Is it actual harm? Is it emotional harm?
There you go.
It's easy
Now
to
you're
say as
speaking
long
my
as I'm
language.
not hurting anybody. That's what I'm saying. You have to have a line. That is not a one spot. Whoa, I am not hurting someone. I'm still not hurting. I'm still. At some point, you might be able. It might be able to be argued that you are in some way infringing.
You may
on
not even
someone.
really know it.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be allowed to do it. Like, for example,
How much harm is it actually doing?
how much harm is it actually doing? And you need to draw that line. We all need to know where that
There
line
has
is.
to be some point of observation where you think critically for yourself and you look around instead of listen to what people have told you could be or could not be harming someone, and just look around in your own personal situation, because every situation is different, and just say, you know what? How much is this really impacting, affecting, or harming
Let me give
me
you an
or
example.
anyone else right now?
It's important to give examples.
What do you see?
Do you think that people should have the right to smoke? Do you think they should? Now, the person smoking could say, well, it only hurts me. And that's true. As long as they're not right in front of someone else who's breathing in. That's true. It's only hurting them. But someone else could go so far as to say, yeah, it's only hurting you now. But when you have to go to the hospital and my taxes have to pay for it, now you're infringing on my rights. Now, you could say, you could make the argument, okay, that person smoking is harming me. You could make that argument. But are you going to make the call that no one who smokes should be allowed to go to the hospital? You see, well, now you start to infringe on the other person's rights too. This is not a fixed black and white line. At what point are you willing to let people be free and do what they want?
Every situation is different.
Everyone's different.
Every situation is different.
You could say the same thing about alcohol. Everyone's got the right to drink if they want to, right? As long as they're legal age or whatever. But that guy's an alcoholic and he got in a car wreck and now my taxes are paying for him at the hospital. Does that mean no one should be allowed to drink? See, at what point do you recognize that, we all have freedom, and yes, we need to be careful not to infringe on other people's freedom, but other people have freedom too, and we need to recognize that this is not a black and white situation. This is a fuzzy line we're walking.
Good point.
Yeah, especially since there's a lot of talk about freedom and liberties in the news right now.
There is a lot, and not just about the thing we all know.
Yeah.
I mean, about many things now is in the news.
Yeah.
So you need to know where your line is.
We might talk about that stuff later.
Maybe, but at this point, we're trying to
Not today.
stay away
Not today.
from that. Trying to keep this video
no,
up
we're not.
on YouTube
Yes,
for as long as possible.
we're trying to keep it.
Now the real fun begins.
I think we've done well so far.
We've done very,
Now we get pulled
very
off
good.
the air.
But the viewers will be the judge.
Yeah.
Or YouTube will.
Yeah,
You see,
somebody will judge us.
if suddenly there's this video has been removed. No, okay, H, whose turn is it? I think it's your turn. It doesn't matter.
It
You
doesn't
can
matter.
read it. Yeah.
Mistreating those who disagreed with Watchtower. We've talked about this. Disfellowshipping people for speaking out against things they felt were wrong. Coercion to get people to hide. CSA.
Yeah. And you all know what CSA is.
Yeah,
We just
we're just not going to say
can't
it.
say it on YouTube. Thanks, censorship. Okay. I have to say that because
Yeah.
so much censorship. So much, which actually ties into what we're talking about
Yeah.
here. Mistreating people who disagreed with Watchtower. We saw that all the time. Even if you were a baptized witness, if you started saying, I have a problem with this particular thing, what was going to happen? You would probably get a shepherding call from the elders because there's something wrong with you that you're disagreeing. It didn't matter how well-founded what you were saying was, you were disagreeing and that made you dangerous. And although they didn't call you that at the time, eventually if you kept pushing and saying, no, you're wrong about this, they would tell you, what would they tell you? Leave it in Jehovah's hands.
Why are
right?
you viewed as being dangerous?
I have
Are
an
you going
experience.
against their narrative?
Lais,
I got a short experience
Lay out
here
your
that I want to
experience,
share
yeah.
real
Sure.
quick that's related to
All
that.
right.
So,
we'll put it in the yearbook.
okay. yeah. Oh,
Trigger.
The round table yearbook.
I had an ex-girlfriend years ago, and we were both Jehovah's Witnesses at the time. She started doing her research, and she, decided she didn't believe it anymore, okay? Now, her brother, who, at the time, and I think could still be, very indoctrinated, he's very in belief of Watchtower and their governing body stance and authority. He respectfully brought up some points that he disagreed with to the elders. And he said, this doesn't make sense. And he's like, and I'm just, I'm not trying to, disagree with the governing body here, but they have it wrong here on a few points. And he discussed a few points that he thought didn't make sense. I think one of them was 1914. And he said, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't believe it or agree with what the governing body says is factual here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another one that he brought up was the anointed class, the 144,000. He didn't protest it. He didn't make a big deal out of it. Okay? And she said they disfellowshipped him for apostasy.
I've heard that. I've
It
heard
was
that happening
that
with people.
serious.
Yeah, that happened.
Disfellowshipped him. And he could not figure out. He was trying to get reinstated. He still believed it. And he was like, why would they disfellowship me? I'm trying to come back and I want to come back. All I did was disagree. And, if only he knew the bigger picture here, if only he knew what we knew, it's like, yeah, that because they're not in search of truth. They're in search of, are you going to be a yes man and support their narrative or not?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about truth.
Well, it's like when I asked the circuit overseer, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you. And he was like, well, what's it about? I'm like, well, I need some answers. I want some answers about 6 and 7. Oh, you can look that up just as well as I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm literally trying to reach out to you because I'm being a sheep. I want some help. Help me out with
You're
this.
supposed to be our leadership.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I get shut down. I mean, that right there was like my eye-opening, like, whoa, really?
Yeah.
You're not helping me one bit here.
Yeah.
And I was fully in. So
I like to say that Watchtower is what happens when the desire for truth becomes the desire for power.
Yeah.
Right?
and again,
or
not
the
just-
search for truth.
and not
becomes the
just in
desire.
Watchtower,
Not
but
just there.
outside of it too.
So ask yourself, in line with this point, mistreating people who disagree with your position. Do you do that, first of all? Because that's the first thing you should ask. Do I mistreat people, think ill of people who disagree with me on some point? Even if it's important to you,
I can be
do I
guilty of that.
mistreat them?
I'm not even going to lie.
I've made some statements.
I can.
try
Sometimes
not-
I can do that.
I try not to.
It might have
Okay.
happened once or twice.
Next step, do you try to coerce people into your position? Do you try to force people into your position?
I used to.
I'll say that. I used to.
Yeah.
But now, no. I don't do it. No, I don't do it now.
If you are trying to do those things, if you are labeling people who disagree with you, if you are mistreating them, if you are trying to force them into your position, then you are doing what Watchtower did to you. You're doing the same thing. And even if you personally don't do those things, if you are supporting those things being done to others who disagree with you, you are doing the same thing. You are supporting the same thing
Or have
Watchtower
truths or
did.
dot connecting.
Warning, don't think too highly of your own opinion
Yeah.
and force it on others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, this is not a black and white straight line. This is fuzzy because it is true that there comes a point in which someone else is in fact infringing on someone else's rights and so on and so on. We've already discussed that. So there are lines to be drawn, but where do you draw it? And you need to know that, because if things start to go past your line in the sand, are you just going to step back and let them keep going farther? Or are you going to say, no, this is where I stop. Like, I will not budge from this point. People deserve to be treated in a certain way. They deserve a certain amount of freedom, and you're crossing that line. Are you willing to stand firm in that position or not? It's important for you to know that and think about that. Just like it was with Watchtower. Like, there was at least for me, I was willing to put up with some things as I started to wake up a little bit and realize that I'm like, well, that they're wrong about that, but it's not that big of a deal, you know, and I'm sure in time it'll get fixed. But there are some things that I started to find out they were doing that was my line in the sand.
Yep.
Like, no, this is just wrong, and I will not support it. And it was at that point that I had to leave because the hypocrisy was terrible. The damage they were doing to people was terrible. So you need to have that line and you need to know where it is. And I need to know where it is. We need to know where it is. At what point do you stop and say no? And part of figuring that out, thinking for yourself, do you mistreat people? Do you coerce people? Or do you support other people who do those things? If you do, you're doing what Watchtower did to you. So think about that.
Yep.
All right, here's the big one. It's not the last one, but it's a big one. Following the money. Who's funding Watchtower? What do their investments look like? That kind of thing.
Always follow the money. Whether it's Watchtower, whether it's mass media, political government organizations, always follow the money.
Anytime someone is talking to you through a video, on a stage, whatever, ask who's paying this person to say this. Now, it's not wrong to get paid. Everybody needs to get paid. We all got to eat. We got to live. It's not wrong. But you have to understand that anytime someone is being paid in a specific position, there is a pressure to conform to a worldview, to an ideology, to a certain form of bias because they're being paid. Now, they may fully believe what they're saying. I'm not saying they're lying to you. They may fully believe what they're saying is true, but you need to understand where that position is coming from and who's funding it. Just like with Watchtower. If you looked at Watchtower's investments, that would tell you everything you needed to know about whether or not they really believed all this stuff was true. When it came to things like smoking and the military and war, they were invested in all these things.
That was one of the things that got me when I was waking up. I'm like, they're investing in war material? They're investing
Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, they're
Morris.
They're investing in tobacco, but yet we're not supposed to go to they're not supposed to go to war, they're not supposed to be in the military, they're not supposed to, but you're benefiting financially from organizations that do the things that you tell people not to do.
Yes. They're a business just like anyone else.
They are.
People don't want to accept
the media
sometimes.
Oh my God.
But that's the reality.
Mass media is a business. Politics is a kind of business. Its money is involved. That's not necessarily bad, but it can create serious conflicts of interest. And you need to understand where that conflict of interest is potentially coming from, if it's there. And even if there isn't one, which way are they going to lean? Because that's who's paying the bills.
And if
you need to know this.
And if there's enough money presented to someone, everybody has a price. Okay. But if there's enough money presented to someone, they can be bought.
They can be bought.
Politicians can be bought. Scientists can be bought. I don't know how many times I've had that conversation. Well, the science says this or this side. Yeah, but who's paying for them to say that? Yeah.
And how powerful are the people that are paying them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know?
And that goes back to coercion, right?
Yeah. You know, there's just me saying this. There's people behind the scenes that we don't see. Like Watchtower.
Yeah.
Do we really see who's funding Watchtower?
Yeah. All right. You can't, because their tax returns, the bulk of their money comes through the United States, and because they're a religion, their tax return doesn't have to be public. Only their investments had to be public, which is how we figured out those things. But we have no clue how much money they're really taking in.
Wouldn't it be shocking to find out where all their money comes from?
Oh, I bet it would.
So they're not audited.
No.
You know?
Right.
Imagine if Watchtower got audited.
Yeah.
What would we find out?
Yeah. A little side point about that, and this gets into lack of transparency.
Should we go to that? Should we point out right here?
We will in just a minute.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
No, let's do it now.
Okay.
It's about following the money.
Yeah, it kind of falls in line with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Let me read it.
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
All right. So, about following the money, we got this. This analysis should also be done for the fact checkers. Fact checkers get paid and have funding. From who? You need to find out. For instance, most of factcheck.org's funding comes from Left of Center Foundation, the Annenberg Foundation, and Big Tech, mostly Facebook, which also leans left. That's not a slam on people who are left-leaning politically, but does it seem right that most of the money going into the fact-checking site comes from groups largely affiliated with one political persuasion? Does that sound like a recipe for fair, unbiased fact-checking? Nobody's completely unbiased. Bible translations are the example, but it's important to know which way an organization is likely to skew.
That's important. And I put the Bible translation example in there for a reason. Like, for instance, the autographs, the original text, nobody's got them, first of all, of the Bible. But the oldest ones that we have, we only know so much, scholars only know so much about what the words mean, right? And sometimes a translator will see a passage, and it could go either way. And it wouldn't be wrong to go either way, right? This word could mean this, or it could mean that. We don't know what they meant because they're not here for us to ask them what they meant.
That's right.
So each translator has to make a decision based on their worldview, which way they're going to go.
Which sometimes have been conflicting.
And yes, they are conflicting sometimes, but they're not necessarily wrong, but they're going to bend to their worldview. So if you're reading, for instance, a fact-checking site, and most of the money from that fact-checking site comes from one political persuasion, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're out to tell you the wrong thing. It doesn't mean that they're lying to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that. But it does mean that when given the choice between it going this way or the data meaning this thing, they're going to choose the one that aligns with their worldview. Naturally, so would I. That's normal. But you need to know which way they will choose.
Yes.
So that you can make sure you find a counterbalance to that and see what the other side has to say about it too. Otherwise, you're only getting one perspective, and that is not how we fill in the gaps in our knowledge.
Exactly.
I have a side point to what you said about the scrolls, and I just want to throw this in here real quick.
Sure.
It's unrelated to current events, but it's related to biblical text. I think it's important to, critically even examine the Bible and text, because a lot of times people will translate these, which can sometimes be conflicting, contradictory. And I think it's important in times like this to remember that it's not what God says, it's what man is saying that God is saying. So that needs to be taken with a grain of salt. It's just a side point that I was thinking of.
In relation to that, going back to the fact check, and this is important, and I was thinking about this on the drive over here. For instance, I'm just going to use factcheck.org. I don't necessarily have a problem with them. It's just the only one I happen to look up, and to their credit, they were transparent about who's paying their bills. They have a page. It tells you this is where all their money comes from. This is how much they paid. It's very easy to know that. Good for them. I'm not attacking them here.
Saying we're hiding that.
I'm just trying to get you to think about it. Facebook has said clearly that they do not want to influence factcheck.org. And factcheck.org has said Facebook does not influence us. You know what I say to that? Bullshit. That's what I say to that. And
I'm sitting here thinking,
I'm
really?
not saying that they intend it to be this way. I'm saying that if somebody is paying your bills, that immediately creates a conflict of interest, or at the bare minimum, a skewing towards a specific position. Because if you know that the person paying your bills isn't going to like what you have to say, are you going to be as straightforward in the way you say it?
Yeah.
Or not? That's human nature. Now, that doesn't mean that they intend it to be that way or that it's this way on purpose, but don't be naive. The people who pay the bills are going to be the people whose worldview anything skews to, because they're paying the bills. Mm-hmm. And so
it usually leans that way.
It usually leans that, or at least enough of the time that you need to make sure you find counterbalancing examples and sources, and don't just rely on one thing or another. Pay attention to where the money's coming from. Don't be naive. Watchtower said everything they had to say was unbiased too. Does that mean it was? Of course not. So just because Facebook says they're unbiased and factcheck.org says they're unbiased, oh, well, they must be telling the truth. Don't assume that's true. Yeah. Even if they're not doing it on purpose, your natural cognitive bias is going to come through, and pressure will be felt if someone else is paying the bills. Keep that in mind. That's important.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
Jay, do you want to read Jay?
Oh, we touched on this.
Lack of transparency. No publicly released tax documents were not required by law, such as the USA No trusted third-party audits released to prove honesty and accountability.
Yeah.
When I left Watchtower, I didn't stop being a Christian immediately. I don't identify as a Christian. Now, you guys know I got mad love for Jesus, but I don't identify as a Christian for a lot of reasons we don't need to go into here. But I went to a wonderful church, and I've talked about it on the channel a lot.
Oh, yeah, I remember the story.
A progressive Baptist church. Wonderful people. You know what they did? Every quarter, they gathered everyone in. They laid out all the money. They showed everything that was coming in, where everything was getting paid to, and everybody had to vote on whether or not it should stay that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that level of transparency and like approval from the congregation? Like knocked me out of my chair, because I came out of Watchtower. And then there was another Christian religion that I was researching, and I don't remember the name of it. It was kind of an smaller one. But they had a third-party independent audit done by a major auditing firm every year and posted the results to their website.
That's awesome.
They didn't audit their books. An independent third party audited their books. And you could see everywhere every dime was going. That, and I'll go back and give snaps to factcheck.org again. The fact that they're telling you where all their money comes from, that's good. That level of transparency is good. Do you know where the money for the media you consume is coming from? Do they post an independent audit to their website that you can go look at and see who's paying them?
Could you imagine if the federal government actually did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'd be all shocked.
This is why it's good to be skeptical, though.
Be skeptical.
Yeah.
Don't believe someone just because they sound good. Don't believe someone just because you agree with them. Don't believe someone just because you're afraid. It's okay to be afraid.
Skepticism is intelligence.
But check it. Who's paying the bills? Are they transparent about who's paying the bills? How are they treating people who disagree with them? All of these points matter.
You know, and I'm gonna bring up an example here. A lot of people that hear the word audit, and they really don't know what it means. Okay, so imagine a dad gives his son $12. All right, and the son says, "Well, Dad, you only gave me 10 because 2 of those dollars were Monopoly money." "No, son, I gave you 12. Dad, there's 2 of them here that are fake." The dad says to the son, "Now you're auditing."
That's awesome.
I see.
You know?
Yeah.
Or it's like, if you've got 30 apples.
So the point is to be critical.
Yeah. So I give you 30 apples, and I tell you to count those apples. And you're like, "Yeah, Jimmy, there's 30 apples there." But then I say, "Okay, touch them, feel them, scratch it." And then you touch one, it's like kind of soft, and you're like, "Oh, this is a lemon." Or this one's an orange painted like an apple. And you go through about 6 of those, and you find there's a couple that are, plastic.
There's no damn apples here.
There's plastic, and now you're down. I'm like, "How many apples do you actually have?" And you, "Well, Jimmy, I only got like 20. But you counted 30. But you only have 20 real apples. That's what auditing is. It's not just looking at something and just accepting it for what it is. Investigate it. And that's what
Makes sense.
Yeah, So,
People need to do that. And that brings us to our second to last point. K. Too much sensationalism and opinion. Too little facts and data. I have got to give my favorite example here. There was an earthquake in North Carolina.
God,
What
yes.
was this, 2 years ago?
yeah, it was like 2 years ago. Yeah.
This one we can all relate to.
It was about 2 hours away from here, right? It wasn't that far. It was a 5, okay? It was a 5 on the Richter scale.
Devastating.
I read the headlines. Oh my God. Worst earthquake in
Barely woke
50
me up.
years hits North Carolina. You would think we were in a war zone. You would think that the whole state had fallen into the
The
ground.
water in my cup
to
literally
read it.
started to move a little bit.
What happened in North Carolina?
It was
I was in
terrible.
the shower. I didn't even feel it. Beth felt it because she was laying down, but I
Great
didn't even
Scott.
feel it. I was in the shower.
I didn't even feel it.
I'm so disappointed. I missed the one tremor that hit North Carolina in
That
50 years.
devastated us.
This is how much damage it actually did, though to read the coverage of it would make you think that we were demolished as a state. 2 bricks fell off a building, and 1 guy tripped and broke his arm.
I mean, look, there's a lake here now.
That's it.
Jeez.
But the sensationalism in the headlines would really make people think that a lot of really bad stuff went down from this terrible earthquake. Now, here's where it gets, what's the word? Not suspicious, but insidious. They didn't lie. It was the worst earthquake in 50 years, but we never have earthquakes. So it didn't take much for it to be the worst in 50 years. So it wasn't a lie, but it made it sound far worse.
John,
than it
can you
really
hear me?
was. So sometimes when you're reading the news, and Watchtower would do this too, when they were talking about how the end is coming and how terrible everything is, and look at these awful examples of how humanity is doomed, they wouldn't always lie, but they made things look much worse than they really were if you dug into it.
That's where the whole thing about propaganda is sensationalized. It's flashy.
It's flashy.
And we can bring up one point about just
And
here
I think
recently
our
in the news
emotions,
with
we get into it emotionally.
That's
There's a
why
lot
they
of
do
it out
it.
there.
Because
It's
once you're hooked
emotional.
in emotionally, you're easier to convince.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
But the most recent thing in the news about the border, about the guys riding the horses and the rains.
Oh yeah,
They-
that's
Yeah,
fair.
we can say that. That's fair.
Yeah,
The mass media came out and said that the border agents were whipping migrants, and they had this.
I haven't
picture.
seen that yet, so I'm just.
Yeah.
I'm,
I
They,
saw it.
they
I
had
saw
this
it.
picture,
and it
Okay.
did look like that.
It
did.
looked like
it. Really did.
but that's not what happened.
you're saying that wasn't the whole story.
No, that
wasn't the story at all.
That wasn't the story at all.
Oh, really?
No, they made it up.
Yeah. The picture looked like something was happening that didn't actually happen, and the guy who took the picture said, "No, that's not what happened."
I also saw a thing.
Oh, wow.
I also saw a meme.
Okay.
That showed a picture of a mama lion with her baby in her mouth. Okay. She had the baby around the neck like cats pick up their animals, right?
Right.
And it's showing the one side of the picture where it looks like she's actually eating the cub. And then the
I
other
think I
side,
did see
and the
that,
other
yeah.
side of the picture shows that she's just holding and its head's right. So it's all perception. The way they took the picture. So and you know, if you're on Facebook, you've seen the memes that show you know
That's something to think about. How come they don't want to present all angles?
because they're
Why
pushing,
is the world
Everybody's
pushing
got an
the
agenda.
narrative, push
They're
all
pu- yes.
angles?
And
I mean,
that's
think about
true.
that.
That's not just true, because we have to be fair. We're not just talking, it's not just the mass media. Everybody does it.
Why are we so afraid of all angles?
The people that the mass media labels as conspiracy theorists do this, the mass media does this, and we are inclined to do it, not always on purpose, because what if we saw the lion from a certain angle and it looked to us like the lion was attacking the cub?
Yeah.
To our understanding, from our perspective, that appears to be what's happening. But someone standing on the other side would see that that isn't what was going on. But we wouldn't know that. And so we might walk away from that situation thinking something had happened that didn't. This
Why
is
it's
why
good to say we don't know all the facts.
this is why there are groups that are trying to stop using eyewitness accounts in courts, because it's just so bad.
Yeah. See this? See that right there? That's a 6. All right. But when me and John look at
That's
it,
a 9.
Yeah.
you know,
From my perspective, it looks like a 9.
yeah, but it's a
Yeah.
6.
Yep.
We could go round and round
But
about
it's a
that.
9.
But then we turn it around and look at each
Now it's
other's
a 6.
perspective.
Right.
Okay.
It's a pin
I
mark.
see
Yeah.
where you say it's a 9.
Yeah. That's important. You need to look at things from the other person's perspective. You don't have to agree to see it from their perspective and try to understand why someone sees it the way that they do. And avoid, anytime any news organization uses a sensational headline, you should immediately call that entire organization into question.
And watch for
That's true.
buzzwords. Watch for buzzwords that
Yeah.
they use. You know.
That's propaganda. It's a propaganda tactic. Just state the facts, but facts don't get clicks. And without clicks, you don't make money. So we go back to where follow the money.
Follow the money.
Follow the money. All right, last one. Now this one's going to make some of you mad, but we're not.
hope
I'm
you
going to
enjoy
preface
it.
it. I'm going to preface it. Let me just say it. Okay, let me read it. Failed predictions. All right, Watchtower made up a lot of claims that never materialized, and they quietly swept them under the rug.
That's true.
This happens in mass media too. Now, Jimmy's going to read some examples. Let me just say it about climate change. I'm not saying that we're all climate deniers here. We're not using
We're just
it for
bringing
that
facts.
purpose.
Be prepared to be very offended.
We're not using it for, I'm not using it for that purpose. The point is to show that sometimes really shocking predictions get made that never materialize. And we should be careful to believe a prediction just because it's coming from someone who sounds authoritative, right? So go ahead and read them.
All right, so we have failed prophecies of the climate change pushers. 1970, they said we will have an ice age by 2000. 1976, they said global cooling will cause a world war by 2000. 1989, global warming and rising sea levels will wipe nations off the map by 2000. 1990, they said we have 5 to 10 years to save the rainforest. 1999, they said glaciers will be gone in 10 years. 2000, they said snow will become a thing of the past. 2007, they said we will have fewer hurricanes. 2008, they said the Arctic will be ice-free in 2012. 2012, they said global warming will cause more hurricanes. 2014, they said the science is settled. Don't question us. 2021, John Kerry says we have 9 years left, and this time there's no faking.
Okay, so
None of that happened.
none of it happened. Now, to be clear, just because a prediction fails doesn't mean that climate science is wrong. I'm just going to throw that out there because most people, I think it's fair to say, do believe that we should be taking better care of the environment. I think most people who are watching probably think that there's an issue. But let's just put that aside right now. Just because the predictions are wrong doesn't mean the basic premise is wrong. But the predictions were wrong.
But the question
wrong.
You have to ask yourself, why did they make these predictions? What was their goal in making these predictions? And how did they want to
That's a good point.
influence the society?
And we come back to fear. If someone can make you afraid, then you're more likely to listen to them and do what they tell you to do, especially if they're in a position of authority. So,
And again, it's another place where you can say, okay, where's money play? Where's the money factor?
Yeah, who's
where's the
funding
money
it?
factor in this? Who's making money off of pushing these predictions?
and this is just one example.
Yes.
Watchtower is an example. All these predictions that Jimmy told you are an example. But this happens in a lot of other arenas. So,
And I have the articles where these come from. So if somebody wants the information, then just shoot me a message and I'll send you where I got it from.
yeah.
Sources are good.
Yeah, we have sources. Just ask us where we got our sources and we'll send them to you.
So what predictions have you read in whatever media you follow over the past couple of years, and have they come true? And if they didn't, did the authors come out and issue a retraction? Did they come out and admit they were wrong? Did they quietly sweep it under the rug? Should you be listening to people who cover up their failed predictions and don't admit that they were wrong? Like, if someone's willing to admit they were wrong, I got respect for that, right?
Yeah.
When a car manufacturer issues a recall because they recognize, we did something wrong, we need to let everybody know so they can bring the car in so they're not in danger. I respect that.
Yeah.
When a car manufacturer tries to hide a problem, that's when I lose respect. And most people do, and you should too. And that applies to any media organization that allows someone to come in and make a prediction, and they're wrong, and clearly wrong, and they don't retract it. They don't talk about the fact that it was wrong, and the person who made the prediction doesn't retract it or talk about that they were wrong. They just try to quietly cover it up. Because who else did that constantly that you now know is full of crap, and that's why you left? Watchtower.
And a perfect example, to bring it to where people may understand what we're talking about here in the story, the Lancet report last year.
That's true.
The Lancet report came out, did a report on a certain drug, and basically condemned it. Okay? Then 2 months later, they had to come back and retract it. The point we're trying to make is everybody heard about the report coming out and the demeaning of this certain drug, but no one heard about the retraction. Why?
Yeah. And we were talking about this earlier. Attorneys will use this frequently. Like, they know that what they're about to say is going to be objected to by the other side because they're not supposed to say it. They're not supposed to say it. But when you have a jury, if the attorney says it anyway, you can't unsay it, right? Everyone in the room has already heard it. The point is made. The damage is done, the effect is received, whether or not the objection gets sustained. right? So if someone can push a narrative out, knowing that it's going to get fact checked and proven as wrong, if they can push it out and get enough people to read it, most people won't see the retraction. Most people won't see the correction, but they'll remember what got said.
Mm-hmm.
And the effect is done. It's done.
They've accomplished what they wanted to do.
They've accomplished the goal. So do the media that you consume, do they do that? Have they done that in the past? You should be aware of these things. And nobody's perfect. We're not saying anyone gets all these things right all the time. We're human beings. The people who write for media organizations are human beings. We're all susceptible to logical fallacies. We're all susceptible to making mistakes. But how do those mistakes get handled?
Yep.
Who's paying the bills? How do they treat people who disagree? All of these things matter with anything that you consume. And people who behave like Watchtower, you should trust as much as you trust the Watchtower. That's all we're saying.
Yep.
However, this is a final point. We can wrap this up.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't know who's right. Sometimes you don't know who's wrong. Sometimes both sides seem to have experts that know what they're talking about. Both sides are very eloquent in the way they put forth their data and the facts and their arguments, and you simply don't know who's right. What do? We were talking about this. What would you do?
Like I was saying earlier, I think this is where it's really good to go on your personal experience. Do your best to rely on your observation, your critical thinking. Because sometimes that's all you got. Sometimes that's all you got.
Yep.
So it can be a really good thing, though, if you are observant.
In the end, if you don't know for sure who's right, all you can do is go with your gut. Because here's the reality. If you don't go with what your experience has taught you is true, you're going with what someone else's experience taught them was true. And what makes them better or more capable of deciding for you what's right for you? Nothing. The only person who knows what you need is you. So if you don't know, go with your experience. Go with your intuition. Just like we were saying.
That's what I do.
It was your intuition that told you something was wrong with Watchtower. Everybody around you, if you had asked them about whatever your issue was, they would tell you you're wrong. But were you wrong? You weren't wrong. You should listen to that. So if people are bombarding you with something they want you to believe, but your intuition is just telling you, they may be smarter than you, they may be more educated than you, whatever, but your intuition is like, no, something's wrong.
Up.
Don't ignore that. Trust your gut.
That's exactly what I've done, John. I look at, if someone's pointing out something, they're saying they're right, and this person's saying they're right. I look at both sides. I try to let things have to make sense to me. To me personally, they just got to make sense. And it's got to be something that's right for the people or right for the individual. If it's not something that's being done to positively affect someone's life, I question it. You know, if it's going to have a negative effect on the population, I'm like, okay, there's something about this. So what I do is I look at a person's actions. I look at events that take place. And of course, trust the gut.
Right.
That's my biggest thing. Trusting the gut and using my own critical thinking. And that's all we want people to do is, learn how to employ critical thinking, how to actually do it. And if you don't, there's plenty of videos, books that can teach you how to do it.
Critical thinking is putting yourself in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And not allowing someone to drive your mind for you or your life for you.
Yeah, just because I tell you this is a cup, you need to find out why I'm telling you that's a cup.
Yeah.
Instead of just accepting it.
Yeah.
No one is beyond question. No one. Not us, not Watchtower, not any government, not any news organization, not any leader, not any spokesperson, not any group, not any business. Everyone needs to be questioned if you feel that something's wrong, and you have the right to ask those questions. And anyone who tells you that you don't, that you should just shut up and listen to this guy because he's smarter than you, they got an agenda, and it's not in your benefit.
Yep.
People who really want what's best for you will listen to you when you ask questions.
And they won't try to peer pressure you either.
They won't. They won't. I think
question everything.
you should, but not in a paranoid way and the skeptical way. If you have the data, the information, the facts to know the answer to a question, good. That's great. If you don't, find out.
Yep.
That's all we're saying. No one is beyond question. Remember that. There was a time you thought Watchtower was beyond question. You found out you were wrong. Apply that to everyone. Apply that to us. If there's anything we've said that you disagree with, disagree with it.
Yeah.
If you think we're wrong, go find out. If you think we're right, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean we are. So listen to the other side.
We're not going to block you.
Yeah, listen to the other side.
Unless you get disrespectful.
Yeah.
Then we'll have to question that.
No nastiness.
We don't tolerate
do it.
abuse, but we're happy to invite questions.
Yes, we don't have a
And
problem with
disagree,
that.
please.
Yeah.
If you disagree, disagree. That's all right.
it.
Just know that
No bitch-assness.
be prepared to bring facts and evidence if you're trying to prove us wrong.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this was a really good discussion.
I've enjoyed it.
It worked out really well.
We hope you guys enjoyed it.
Us doing what we do, whether the camera's on or off.
I can't believe, and I don't know if you guys know this yet or not, but I saw a post that Diasis put up today. A memory came up on his Facebook page, and it was from 2 years ago. Exactly 2 years ago today, we premiered the last roundtable we did basically for season 1.
Irony, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was
really
it was our Freemason video, and it was premiered on this day exactly 2 years ago, and we have come back on this day.
What we do.
That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
It is cool.
We didn't plan it. We didn't plan it that way.
I mean, look, we've been talking out here so long, they put a table out here for us.
Yeah, so.
I didn't think I would ever get back on.
We didn't think
I didn't think you would either.
I didn't, and they tried to get me to. I'm like, no. But
You've got to come back just because of the rumors that are circulating about you. Okay. They got abducted by aliens.
I don't care what people think. I don't care what people think about me. I mean, nobody doesn't care at all, but like I largely don't care what people think. But I started to
We were trying to get you to care. You're like, yes.
I even had a conspiracy theory. I had a conspiracy theory
I did too.
on why he left. I actually had to apologize.
He's a clone.
I had to apologize
I knew
to him
it.
later.
It was a good one, though. It
was
was
a good one.
It was a good one. It wasn't
done.
true, but it was good. But it got to the point when I started to see all these things started to happen. That I'm like, I have to talk about it. I have to talk about it.
Yeah.
So here we are talking about it.
Final thoughts?
No, that's it, man. We covered it, man. We blasted it.
All right. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Be nice. Disagree if you want. I don't know when this will happen again, but I do think it's going to happen again.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be something we're going to do as regularly as we did before because we're just so busy with everything. But we will, when we do get together, we seriously do plan these out. John works hard on putting a thing together. We really do this because we want to get information out to everyone. We want people to think. We want people to just open their minds, and we just want people to be happy and just show love to each other. Yeah. That's a big thing. Yeah. Do you want to, what's the word I'm looking for? Promote Watching Watchtower. You got Watching Watchtower in your Facebook group?
Yeah, definitely.
So we got a lot of new people out there that may not know what we have going on. So
absolutely.
How can people get in touch with you?
You guys are more than welcome to join my group, Watching Watchtower on Facebook. And then, of course, Jimmy has his group, Toppling the Tower Globally, also on Facebook.
I will say...
Check us out.
Go ahead. Okay.
No, that's it.
If you do want to join Toppling the Tower Globally, you'll have to send me a message because I do have the group private and hidden to keep out trolls. I've had some issues with some trolls, so I've had to take care of that.
The trolls.
So, and then Diaz has got a YouTube channel. I've got a YouTube channel.
If you want to contact me, don't.
Yeah.
He just let me or Diasis know if you need something from John, and we'll take care of it.
I'm a raging introvert, but if there's something important, I don't even read comments anymore. But if there's something important, you leave a comment directed to me. Jimmy reads all of them, and anything important he'll pass on to me. But I'm not on social media. Like I don't do any of that anymore. I'm reverting to my.
Do we want to give him a teaser about the Roundtable having its own channel?
Oh, yeah. Okay. We are probably going to create a channel just for the Roundtable because, like, the direction, as you may have noticed today, is going to change quite a little bit and doesn't make much sense to keep it here with all the other videos that are very directly and only about Watchtower. So we're going to be setting up its own channel, and when we do, we'll let everybody know, so you guys can all subscribe over there if you want to see the videos that we do in the future.
I think the biggest thing we're doing this is because we've grown.
We have.
And that's the important thing when you leave Watchtower. You have to continue to grow. And so, yeah, you haven't heard us debunk a lot of Watchtower doctrine and prophecy. And
There's life after Watchtower.
Yeah, and like I said in our teaser videos, we're not going to go down that road. There's enough XJW videos out there that will do that. So we see a bigger picture. We see things happening all over the place, and we want to tie them all together and talk about stuff like that. So it's going to be a little bit different than what some of you folks that have watched us before are used to. But we're still going to be ourselves.
Yep.
We're still going to bring you great information. Hopefully you find it great information. And just...
or at least really fun opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just, just do what we do.
Yeah. We'll try to be interesting. And just, if nothing else, let us be an example. We differ on so many things. We argue nicely, mostly, with each other.
Have we ever really argued?
No, I guess not.
Are you
really.
kidding?
Oh,
Okay,
y'all,
yeah,
you
no,
two.
okay, yeah, I guess that is
Well,
true.
we've argued. Okay, yeah, okay, yeah.
Mostly, we don't argue. Mostly,
We've grown.
But-
We've
See,
grown.
we're arguing now.
but we don't always agree. But we're still good friends because you don't have to agree to get along.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson I think people really need to learn right now.
Yeah.
Because in the current climate, I swear, it's us versus them, black versus
God,
white, good
cancel
versus
culture,
evil,
cancel culture, cancel
Anyone who
culture.
doesn't think like
Exhausting.
I do is not a good human being. I mean,
Stop
come
them.
on.
They're disagreeing with me.
Yeah.
How could they do that?
Don't do that. Anytime you're inclined to do things like that, remember that's what Watchtower did to you.
Yep.
And unless you want to be like them, you have to stop being like them and get as far away from that kind of thing as possible. It's not easy because it's our nature to be that way. We're tribal by nature. But you can learn to be different.
Yep.
You can learn to be better. When you know better, you do better. And that's what we're here to try to encourage. That's it. We're not always going to be right. We don't pretend to always be right. Okay, I pretend to always be right. But I know I'm not always right. I'm not always right. Not even a little.
I've been right a lot here lately.
You have been. And when we've discovered that
I
we
was
were
right all
wrong, we've
along.
been willing to
Yes.
listen. You know?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Nothing.
Okay.
I'm going to have to take that.
Yeah, we'll have to rewind that and see what you said.
Like, damn it.
Be humble enough that when you
They got me.
recognize that you're wrong, you don't get defensive. Maybe a little bit.
And when you find out that you're right, be humble.
Be humble. Be humble.
That's important.
All right, guys. Well, that'll wrap it up. Had a great time. We'll be back, and we'll let you know where that's going to be at. Until then, we will catch you later.
Thank
See
you,
you
everyone.
soon.